Hello, welcome to the Splintered Image on YouTube. Today I'm going to be doing an art discussion for a print called Tentacle Titan from the year 1990. This will be the first in a series of art discussions. I'll be covering a bunch of different techniques and mediums, maybe different artists down the road. We'll see how it goes. Up until this point on my YouTube channel, I've been doing poetry readings and prose readings, and those are all from my material that's on my website called The Splintered Image. So I'll do a quick plug for the website, www.thesplinteredimage.com, and that should have come up on the screen by now. On the website, I have galleries of photography, galleries of artwork. I've got tons of photography and artwork. I'm constantly adding new things to it, bringing up older stuff and doing new work. I have a poetry section, so I do a poem of the month. I've got some mini poems on there and some other stuff. And my blog, which is a creative writing blog, experimental writing, whatever you want to call it. It's basically me just free forming and doing a bunch of crazy stuff with words for about, a page and pairing that with some weird photography that I've been working on. And then I've been reading that on YouTube, that blog, and the poetry, which I do each of those once a month. So on the first of the month, I release a new poem of the month. On the 15th or 16th, I release a new blog. And then I do spoken word versions of both of those. I also have sample chapters from my published novels. So I'm self-publishing fiction novels. They're paranormal fiction novels, and sample chapters are available on my website. The novels right now are ebooks on Lulu. Depending on when you watch this video, there could be more. I'm going to be doing different formats like print, paperback, hardcover in the future, and they'll be in different locations too. I'm looking into KDP and other things to get those out there. The two novels are Raven Bend and Shades of Night presents New Blood, which is a continuing storyline. New Blood is the first in the 5-part series that comprises one story called Shades of Night, and both of those are paranormal mystery slash adventure, ghost adventure, whatever you want to call that. And I have a bunch more of those in line to be published very soon too. So that's a little bit of a plug for the website. Everything on there is free. Of course, you can buy the novels where they're available. Everything else on the website is just for enjoying. Hopefully you enjoy it if you go there and check it out. So a couple different things. Before I go into this, first of all, why am I doing my own artwork and not doing art commentary on a classical artist or a newer artist? There's tons of new artists out there all over the internet and all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Amazing, amazing artists out there. I'm seeing them all the time. So eventually I would like to do some discussion on some older art, like a Rembrandt or Picasso or something like that. The thing is, there's plenty of information on those kinds of artists out there. Classes you can take, books you can read, things online, art discussions online. It's not like it's something that's very unique, but I could always put my own spin on it or do a more subjective analysis of those kinds of things, which I'm looking into doing in the future. It's something in the back of my mind. Doing a new artist would be something I would have to get some rights for or get their permission to do it. And I would also want their insight. I'd have to discuss with them how they went about doing the print, how, or the painting or the drawing, what their process was, what their techniques were. So I would have to do all that going into it. By doing my own work, it's not out of narcissism or self-aggrandizement, but because I was there and because I know what went into it, I can discuss the process, the medium, the technique that went into the image. And it's, for me to start out with, I think that's an interesting thing to do because I can give insight into the actual creation of the piece of artwork, whether it be a print like this or a painting. Now, when I go forward with this, I'm also going to be using this paintbrush as my pointer. I was going to get a pointer online and then I couldn't be bothered. So this is the best I can work with right now. At least it stands out against the print. The other thing I wanted to discuss was the title, Tentacle Titan, which is a misnomer. This is an octopus. It is not a squid. Octopuses do not have tentacles. Squids do. So when I did this print in 1990, in my first semester of college, I liked octopuses a lot, but I didn't know the difference and I didn't have a lot of knowledge about cephalopods. So I named the Tentacle Titan, and that's what's going to be because it was done a long time ago. I'm not going to change the title of it now. Besides which, Arm Titan sounds a little bit, I think Tentacle Titan sounds better. Let's put it that way. But just in case someone looks at that and wonders about it, no, octopuses do not have tentacles. Squids do, but that's just the name. So we're going to go forward and leave it at that. So I majored in printmaking when I went to USF, and I had already got my associate's degree, and I had to pick a major for my studies. I had done a bunch of different mediums up until that point, and done paintings and drawings and 2D designs and all that kind of stuff. But I kind of wanted to do something that I hadn't been introduced to before, or hadn't really learned before, and I had no knowledge of printmaking. So I minored in painting, majored in printmaking, and then I had two different choices of directions to go in. So the two main fields of printmaking are lithography and intaglio. Lithography, or lithograph, is a relief print. So you work with a raised surface. You have a big stone with a raised surface on it, and the ink is daubed on top of that. You think of it like a giant stamp pad, and that's how the print is pulled. Intaglio is the opposite of that. It's an incised etching. It's an engraving where you actually cut into something, and then the cuts or the grooves or the textures in the plate hold the ink so that you can pull your print. So that's what I went with. It was an arbitrary choice. I decided to do intaglio. It seemed interesting to me. I will probably never do intaglio again. I don't have the equipment or the materials to do that, and I probably never will. But it was a great learning experience, and I did do other types of artwork in the college curriculum. I did do a lot more painting and stuff like that. But I just wanted to do something that was outside of my field of knowledge at the time, and try something different. So to start with, there are different types of intaglio you can do. So you can do anything that you can etch into, basically, or cut into, you can use for an intaglio print. Plexiglass, wood, you could do wood cut, you could do metal. I would imagine you could do plastic or styrofoam. Whatever you can put a texture into, you can basically do, and ink that up and do it as an intaglio print. And then there's different procedures for doing it. There's gum prints and photogravure. Photogravure is one of my favorites from when I was working on my prints in college. And I will do, of course, in the future, discuss photogravure and do some of my prints that I use for that. But this is a standard intaglio print. This is a zinc plate, and the zinc plate is etched in a nitric acid bath. So you can cut into it, or you could just do cutting. You could literally just cut into the plate. You could put lines in the plate, scratch stuff into it, and then just print that. But this was actually etching. So it's etched with nitric acid. If you put a groove into the plate, if I drew a line here and then put it in nitric acid, it would etch that line deeper, and you would get a deeper line. So to get all the gradations, we have a medium called asphaltum, and it's basically powdered asphalt. It's asphaltum dust. So this would go, the paper would go into a box that would have the asphaltum, cover it with dust, warm it up a little bit, and when you warm it up, it actually adheres to the plate so that the nitric acid doesn't just wash it off. You can also put the asphaltum into water and dip the plate into water, dip your whatever you're using into water, and the asphaltum, wherever it sticks to the plate, it gives you kind of neat swirl designs, which again, I will be discussing that down the road with some of the times I've done that. So with this here, the asphaltum goes on here. Now, the thing is, asphaltum resists the acid. So anywhere there's asphaltum at, it's not going to etch the plate. So if you look in here, there's millions of little tiny dots of dust, and the acid would etch around all those little areas of dust and then give you this really fine tooth to the plate, a really, really deep texture that will hold a lot of ink. Anywhere where you see white, this is where the plate is basically smooth, where there's no texture to it. So because I wanted white areas, I wanted to keep this from etching, this part here. Now, there are two other things that I'm aware of that will also resist the acid. One of those is toner from a printer, which is used in photogravure, which I will get into again in another episode. And then there's also Sharpie marker. Just a basic Sharpie marker resists the nitric acid. So when I started doing this print, all this area here, so the first thing I did is I did the drawing, the octopus drawing. I put the drawing onto the plate, and anywhere where you see these lines were all drawn in, and then all these suckers in these areas here were drawn in, like with a scratch a little fine pointed object that I scratch all this stuff into the plate initially. Then I covered these areas, these white areas here were all covered with Sharpie marker to give the highlights. And then before it was even put in the acid bath, that kept these areas white. Then I put it into the acid bath and I started doing etching. Now I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see the stippling. And all these tiny little dots that you see, this is all stippling with the Sharpie marker. So I would do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dots over a period of days at least. It might have been a week or two. I don't remember at the time. It's been a long time ago. But what I would do is I would take the Sharpie marker, the tip of it, and put all these tiny little dots in here, and then put the plate in the acid bath to etch it. So I would do all these areas, like these gray areas were all done at the same exact time. And I had to do the whole plate at once, etch it in the acid, then to do the next layer, next layer, next layer, etch it in the acid. I don't remember how many times I did that, 5, 6, 7 times. It was a very continual process, and then trying to keep the little stippling dots even to make it look like a smooth blend. And then, of course, all these darker areas, let me pan back on a little bit here. All the darkest areas were areas that were left until the end. So these were uncovered with anything to resist the acid. They had the asphaltamine. They kept etching and etching and etching until you get this really, really fine, fine, fine grain in here. Now, once you get all that stuff done, then you would ink the plate. And then all these areas here, so put the ink on the plate. This is a black print. You can also do color intaglio. You can do multiple colors. You can print the same plate in the same area and get different kinds of effects with that. But this was just a black and white print. Then you take a cheesecloth or tarlatan and you wipe off all the ink. And so wherever you see white, that's going to be a totally smooth plate. And then the ink will hold in these areas. And that's how you get all the different gradations in the plate. And then you get the plate all nice and cleaned off. So when you put it through the printing press, you actually put the plate face down on a piece of damp paper. So soak the paper in the box that has water in it to get it kind of damp. Put the plate face down on the paper, and then you run it through a hand crank printing press, which is a very old fashioned. You just kind of crank the crank on the side of it, and there was a big, huge table with cloths on it that you would put that in there. Now, before you get to that stage, the final printing stage, we would also do test prints. You would go through the process of it, because the thing about printmaking is what you're doing is you're creating something that's in your mind, and you really don't know until you get to the end of it exactly how it's going to look. You have a vision of it, but like with a painting or a drawing or something like that, you always have the thing right in front of you, so you always know the progress that you're making and what you need to do to it. So with the print, you can actually do test prints. Pull it through the printing press, see how it looks, do more work on it. Pull it through the printing press, do more work, and we would call those a test print or a test proof. Then once you get to the point where you're very satisfied with the image, the final one is the artist proof. The artist proof is basically saying, that's it. This is what I'm going to do my final edition of. This is the main image that I'm going forward with. And then you print your edition. So the thing is, I have an artist proof around here somewhere, and I probably have test proofs around here somewhere. I have no idea where they're at. So I'm not going to worry about that. I may dig them up one day. I think it will be interesting to revisit some of that, the earlier process in doing the plate. You have a couple more things. Title down here, Tentacle Titan. Name, now I artistically go by Daniel. Year 1990. And then the number in the edition, or the print set. So this is 3 out of 5. So I did 5 prints in this set. You could do 10, you could do 20. Larger artists or artists that does it for printmaking for a living might do hundreds of prints. And then they might have a staff of people or a couple of assistants that might help them. Once the artist gets the plate done, anyone can ink it and put it through the printing press. That's just kind of, reproducing the same thing. The cool thing about intaglio is that, or printmaking, is that each print is going to be just a little bit different than the others. Maybe microscopically, because nobody's perfect. Everything is done by hand. So there could be a little bit of a difference in the edge, or just one little area, that's just one imperfection. So even though you might have 100 of the same thing, it's the identical image, but each one is going to be unique just because each one is hand printed. It's hand inked, it's hand printed. So there were 5 in this set, and I think my family has the majority of those. Um, and I think I may still have an artist proof floating around here somewhere. Like I said, I just don't know where. One other thing I want to touch on is what's called chiaroscuro. So chiaroscuro is the interplay between light and shadow. So if you see a piece of artwork where there's a lot of really intense lighting, a lot of really intense shadows in that, that's using heavy use of chiaroscuro. Black and white movies are heavy in chiaroscuro. You go back to classic movies like The Maltese Falcon and Citizen Kane, and they pioneered the photographic use of black and white. Black and white is very high contrast, so it gives you a lot of intense contrast between light and dark. And especially if you know how to use your lighting properly, like if you think of a movie like Citizen Kane, the shadows are just as important as the light. They're used to tell the story. And so chiaroscuro is a very useful tool in creating dramatic effects and high contrast effects. And of course, black and white is naturally high contrast because of the black and white. So you get naturally high chiaroscuro in those prints. So this is my final edition of the Tentacle Titan, produced in 1990. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you checking the video out. I'll be doing a bunch more of these in the future. You're welcome to stop by and see what's new. Take care and have a great day.